There are addictions so quiet, so culturally accepted, so deeply embedded in everyday living that they no longer look like chains. They do not announce themselves with chaos. They do not always come with obvious destruction. They often appear as habits we defend, emotions we justify, patterns we excuse, or comforts we retreat to when God feels distant. They walk beside us unnoticed, shaping our decisions, draining our peace, clouding our judgment, and slowly dulling the very spiritual sensitivity God placed within us to hear Him. Have you ever wondered why you feel spiritually numb even though you pray? Why your heart feels heavy without a clear reason? Why certain cycles keep repeating no matter how many times you promise yourself a fresh start? It is often because the human heart, when left unguarded, forms attachments God never designed it to carry. Attachments that steal devotion. Attachments that dilute purpose. Attachments that disguise themselves as harmless, normal, or not that serious, yet quietly weaken your intimacy with God. The most dangerous addictions are not always the ones people warn you about. They are the ones hidden beneath personality, routine, relationships, and private thoughts. And many believers today walk with God publicly while secretly feeding what He has already called them to release, not out of rebellion, but out of unawareness. Today, we're bringing light to 7 of these hidden addictions, not to shame you, not to condemn you, but to help you see what may have been silently draining your strength, disrupting your peace, and distancing your heart from God without you realizing it. Because there comes a point in every believer's journey when God stops whispering and begins to confront, not to punish, but to restore. He places His hand on the very thing we thought we could manage, control, or hide, and in that moment, He's not exposing you, He's exposing what has been holding you hostage. Addictions are not always born from rebellion. Many are born from pain, from exhaustion, from disappointment, from seasons where God felt silent. When the heart feels unheard, it reaches. When it feels unseen, it clings. When answers delay, it searches for comfort elsewhere. And that elsewhere can slowly become a dependency, a false source of peace, an emotional refuge outside of God. Over time, what once felt like a coping mechanism becomes a chain. This is why spiritual clarity requires honesty, because many are praying for breakthrough while holding on to the very thing blocking it. They are asking for direction while feeding what is blinding them. They desire peace, but have not released the habit that disrupts it the moment it enters their thoughts. And because these addictions are socially acceptable, no one questions them. But God does. That is why this moment matters. These 7 addictions are not random, they are subtle, they are common, and they are deeply rooted. Yet God confronts them because each one replaces Him. Each one slowly robs you of clarity, authority, peace, and alignment. So as you listen, do not respond with defensiveness, respond with discernment. Ask the Holy Spirit quietly, "What have I normalized that you have not approved?" Because this is not a message of condemnation, this is a moment of deliverance. Richard never considered himself addicted to anything. If someone had suggested it, he would have dismissed it immediately. To him, addiction meant substances, destructive habits, or obvious dysfunction. But his life looked stable. He prayed, he worked hard, he showed up, he was disciplined, respected. Yet there was a quiet heaviness he couldn't explain. One morning, he sat in his car long after arriving at work, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, eyes fixed but unfocused. Nothing around him was falling apart, yet something within him was.
His chest felt tight, his mind restless, his spirit distant. That morning marked something deeper, because God doesn't always speak through noise. Sometimes He speaks through stillness, through a quiet awareness that something is out of alignment. And over the weeks that followed, God began to reveal something Richard never saw before. Not loud sins, but quiet addictions. The first was control. Richard had built his life on structure, planning, and self-sufficiency. He believed he was being responsible, wise even. But slowly, God revealed the truth. He wasn't following God, he was managing outcomes. He didn't pray for direction, he prayed for confirmation. And beneath his need to control was fear. Fear of disappointment, fear of loss, fear of things not going his way. Control had become his safety, but it had also become his prison. Then came approval. Richard didn't recognize it at first. He thought he simply valued relationships and doing well. But God showed him how deeply his identity was tied to people's reactions. Praise lifted him, silence unsettled him, criticism crushed him. He was living for validation he already had in God, but had not truly embraced, and it left him exhausted, constantly performing, never resting in who he already was. The third was escapism. Whenever life felt overwhelming, Richard distracted himself. Scrolling, entertainment, constant activity. Nothing looked sinful, nothing seemed wrong, but those moments replaced stillness with noise. They numbed him instead of healing him. They filled his time, but emptied his spirit. He had learned how to avoid discomfort without realizing he was also avoiding God. Then came anger. Not loud anger, not explosive rage, but quiet irritation, hidden frustration, a subtle tension beneath his calm exterior. It had become his default response to pressure and unmet expectations. And God revealed something deeper. His anger was not the problem, it was the cover. Beneath it were wounds he never addressed, and what he kept justifying was quietly stealing his peace. Next came comparison. Richard constantly measured his life against others. Achievements felt small, progress felt slow, nothing felt enough. He consumed content not to learn, but to evaluate himself, and with every comparison came discouragement. God showed him clearly comparison had been stealing his gratitude and distorting his purpose. Then came busyness. His schedule was full, his days structured, his time occupied. He believed productivity meant purpose, but busyness became a disguise. It kept him too distracted to hear God, too tired to seek God, too overwhelmed to enjoy God. He wore exhaustion like a badge of honor without realizing it was draining his soul. Finally, God revealed the root beneath it all: self-reliance. Richard believed in God, but depended on himself, his strength, his plans, his timing. He prayed, but he did not surrender. And that quiet belief that everything ultimately depended on him was the foundation of his exhaustion. One night, everything surfaced. He sat at the edge of his bed, the room quiet, his thoughts loud. And for the first time in a long time, he was honest. I don't know how to let go. It was not rebellion, it was truth. And in that moment, God met him, not with condemnation, but with clarity. You have been carrying what I never asked you to hold. That sentence changed everything, because Richard realized something deeply important. Addictions are not always external behaviors. They are internal attachments. They are what we run to instead of God, what we defend instead of surrender, what we cling to even when it weakens us. And the moment light touched those patterns, their power began to break. Not instantly, but steadily. Richard began the process of release. He chose surrender over control, identity over approval, stillness over escape, peace over anger, gratitude over comparison, rest over busyness, dependence over self-reliance. And something began to shift. Not because he became perfect, but because he became honest.
And now, this becomes your moment. Because what God revealed to Richard is not unique to him. These patterns are common, subtle, often unnoticed. But they do not have to remain. Hear this clearly. You are not defined by what you have struggled with in secret. You are not bound to patterns that have followed you for years. And you are not meant to carry what God never placed on you. Even now, something is shifting. The heaviness, the confusion, the quiet unrest. God is not ignoring it. He is addressing it. You are stepping into a season of release. Release from pressure, release from comparison, release from exhaustion, release from hidden patterns. And as you walk forward, you will begin to hear him more clearly, trust him more deeply, and experience him more personally. Because God does not expose to shame. He exposes to heal. And what he has revealed, he is ready to restore. Walk in that awareness. Walk in that truth. Walk in that freedom. Keep walking with God.